Didn't switch. I don't have a camera. There we go. Welcome everybody into the NGK Tech Garage. Today guys, we're talking EVAP, and in particular we're talking Chrysler EVAP, and even more in particular we're talking Chrysler ESIM, or Emission System Integrity Module. We're working with a 4.7 liter Jeep Commander today. This thing has the P0456 EVAP code. If we take a peek at the scan tool, I have it currently pulled up with the code on the screen. Please ignore the purge solenoid code, guys. That one was from me messing around with the system before we got this video rolling today. I didn't want to clear the codes because the small leak code is incredibly difficult to get back on this vehicle. So, P0456 small leak code for this vehicle. So we're not throwing any parts at it today. We're not, throwing a gas cap on it. Everything on this vehicle, from what I can see, appears to be original, including the original gas cap on here. So we're going to take a look at how the system functions on this vehicle, and then we're going to get into diagnosing it. The smoke machine is set up over there so we can smoke the system from multiple places to show you guys what to do when you're testing this system. All right. Oz, don't worry, you made it on time. Chris just likes to give you a hard time, I guess. All right, so let's start off with TSBs, right? It's always a good place to start. Because we have a P0456 code, I went ahead and took a look for TSBs related. We have a 456 due to a small leak due to loose charcoal from the canister. So apparently, between these build dates here, there was an issue with the charcoal escaping from the canister and flooding through the system, creating a small leak code. Now I went and I took a look at the MDH number for this vehicle, and no joke, this vehicle was built 1 day after this TSB, or 1 day after the build date cutoff for this TSB. So we're going to go ahead and kind of assume that it doesn't apply, but we're not going to forget about this as we're doing our testing, our inspection, our verification type of stuff as we move forward. Because that 1 day window, supposedly this TSB doesn't apply. But who knows? If it was a year after, a month after, I'd be a little bit better with, tossing the paperwork in the trash type of thing. But 1 day kind of makes me want to keep that in mind as we're going through this. So let's start off with just talking quickly about the system itself. So we're going to go with just a quick component overview. This system actually is relatively simple. We have really a very few amount of components in here. We don't have a fuel pressure sensor that we have to worry about. We have our starting here with our gas cap, number 9. Gas cap goes down to the gas tank. We have a hose running off to our canister. Mounted on the canister is the ESIM assembly. That's our EVAP integrity monitor right there, or module, whatever you'd want to call it. That's mounted directly to the canister. From there we have a filter element on the fresh air side. Coming out of the tank, we run to our purge solenoid right here, and then we run to the intake manifold vacuum. So really we only have a few components on here that could be causing us our problem. Purge solenoid related, our ESIM or canister assembly, depending on which way you'd want to repair that, and then hoses and lines, fuel tank, the pump seal that fits in between the sending unit, fuel pump module in the tank, and then the obviously the gas cap and filler neck connections. But really, it's really not all that complicated of a system, and it falls under that same principle as what the NVLD system does that Chrysler used before they went to ESIM, where they're using natural vacuum created by the temperature change in the fuel to test the system for leaks. So how it's doing it is it's with this little module here on the side. This is your ESIM. This is what's mounted directly onto the tank. In the middle here, this is the brains of the operation. This is just a simple pressure switch. That's all this is right here. All right? As this diaphragm moves, it's going to press on this switch, which this diaphragm is going to move when the system's in vacuum. Because this is a normally sealed system, this diaphragm moves, pushes on the switch, makes contact, PCM's happy. If the tank is able to create vacuum inside of it, we're good to go. We can pass the small leak test. These little guys right here are weights or check valves, however you want to, whatever you want to call them. They slide back and forth with seals on either end, and that's what's sealing the system, plus it's providing our pressure or vacuum relief. Because we have to have the system vented to fresh air. Just like every other EVAP system out there, there has to be some way for fresh air to get in and out when we're filling up with fuel, or the tank is cooling quickly or heating rapidly. We have to be able to let that pressure or vacuum escape. So we took out, and now I dropped it, we took an ESIM apart, and simple cover on top. Here's the larger weight. This one is our pressure relief weight. And then somewhere right here, this longer weight here with the smaller suction cup, that is our, or smaller gasket, that is our vacuum relief. The larger one here is our pressure relief. They fit inside of here, and here's our diaphragm, and then right here's our pressure switch inside of there. So the diaphragm sits over that and presses upon that pressure switch, and then these guys, pressure relief, fits inside of here, and vacuum relief fits inside of here. The issue is that this guy right here, these have to be able to freely move. As you shake these things, you'll hear them rattle. They have to be able to freely move inside of there, and like every good Jeep owner, you take this thing off-road, you go down gravel roads, whatever, you plug up that vent or this fresh air path right here. Eventually this filter here is going to become contaminated and allow those contaminants into our ESIM module or unit component and cause these little valves to stick inside. Then we never seal up, or we stick closed, that kind of thing. So we're going to take a look at that. These things, the wiring diagram for these systems are incredibly simple. 2 different components. We have a purge solenoid grounded all the time that's telling me that this is most likely pulse width modulated power. Good old Chrysler running PWM power, they're pretty common for that. Hard ground to what looks like maybe some sort of body ground of some kind. But we're going to pulse that power to the purge to turn that on and off. And then our ESIM is going to pull in about 4.5 volts, key on, engine off. Very, very small milliamp draw on there. And you're looking at about 1 ohm of resistance across that switch on there when it's closed. So a very basic system. We're not looking at testing a ton of components. Now, does this wiring diagram really matter for us today? We're looking again at a P0456 small leak code. That tells me 2 things, 3 things really. We don't have a circuit fault for our purge solenoid. We don't have a stuck fault or even a circuit fault for our ESIM. And we are going to most likely have to smoke test this. That's going to be our best way to diagnose this small leak code. It's also telling me that our large leak has most likely passed. Now, if you're wondering about the large leak, I'm going to go ahead and flip the ignition switch on here for you guys. The scan tool does have the ability to run a large leak test. So we go back out of codes, we go into system tests. Now I'm not going to run it today just to save on time, but you can run your EVAP monitor test. It can take actually quite a while, and it does say right here that it'll force the EVAP test to run, but it will not force the small leak, and it will not change the monitor status. Okay, it's able to run just the large leak, which is the intrusive test. That's where it's using the purge solenoid to test. It's not running our small leak. And right here it says test may take up to 20 minutes to run. It probably isn't going to take the full 20 minutes, depending on conditions. But we're not going to run it today just to save on time. I can tell you that I've run the test multiple times on this vehicle. It has to be running. It has passed the large leak test every single time, telling me that the ESIM switch, the little contact switch inside here, is functioning. My purge solenoid is at least doing something. The system is able to pass that large leak. So we're going to go ahead and somehow exit out of here. There we go. We're going to exit out of there. And then we also have the ability to look at a little bit of data on this system. If the vehicle were running, we're able to see some purge control, whether it's on or off, right here. It actually is able to measure the current being used by the purge, and then I believe it's over here, there's our ESIM switch. So right now our switch is reading open. That's telling me that our system does not have vacuum inside of it, closing that contact switch. All right. Need to know stuff with the ESIM system. You cannot force the small leak test. It is a very long process for this thing to run the small leak test. There's, I think it was 17.5 hours for the test to run. You can't force it to happen. It is a pain in the rear to get the small test done. You never ever want to modify this thing's position on the canister. There are weights inside that have to be able to slide back and forth. It's basically using gravity in order to function. So never modify its position because it'll throw off how the weights function and you'll end up with a check engine light. Again, the system is normally sealed. Under 1/2 inch of water, you're going to see the pressure release valve move and allow pressure to escape the unit. 2.2 inches of vacuum, we're going to see that vacuum side release. And it takes roughly 1 inch of vacuum for the system to close using that switch. So we would see ESIM switch closed at roughly 1 inch of vacuum inside of the tank. So very, very small amount of vacuum inside of there. To run this test, it does take 17.5 hours to complete, but those 17.5 hours don't need to be continuous. It can be done in chunks, basically dumping the time into the 17.5 hour bucket. So it has to be longer than 60 minutes to record the event, so you have to shut the vehicle off with certain conditions prior to shutting it off, sit for 60 minutes at least, and then it'll record that time and dump it in the 17.5 hour bucket. Once that's full, if it passed, it passed. If it didn't, it's going to go ahead and push into the intrusive large leak testing. A thing to note with these things, it is possible that the purge solenoid is opened up upon key off, engine off. This is a way to make sure that our contact switch inside of our ESIM here is not stuck closed. Okay? What it's doing is it's giving us a large leak with the purge solenoid right here. The computer's going to turn this guy on, and that's going to open up our path and allow any pressure or vacuum that might be built up inside of the tank. It's going to allow that to vent off, and it should allow our switch to open. If our switch doesn't open, we're going to set a code because the switch is stuck or there's blockage somewhere in the system. Okay? Normal operation, if you see that purge solenoid function upon key off, engine off, it's normal. I believe the spec was 30 seconds at the most that it'll run. Vacuum is going to build naturally as the tank cools, and when we smoke test the system, we have to make sure we pinch off that fresh air vent hose. All right, so if we go back to our diagram here, when we smoke test, the number 5, our ESIM right here, before I said it was 1/2 inch of water to overcome the pressure relief for that. So as soon as we put our smoke machine on there, we're going to be overcoming that pressure relief, and we're just going to push all our smoke out through our air filter for the system. So we're going to have to pinch this hose off somewhere in order to seal the system. There's no way to seal the ESIM itself without, I'm just going to use a pair of ice grips to seal off that rubber hose. A hose clamp pliers would be better if I didn't leave it at home today. So we're using vice grips. It'll get the job done. But if you have hose clamp pliers to pinch that off, it's a much better way to do it. So let's start in on this. I like to do what's easiest first. I don't want to get the smoke machine out right away if I don't have to. Can a purge solenoid itself cause a small leak code? The answer is yes, right? If the purge solenoid were partially stuck open, it could cause our system to never build into a vacuum. So why don't we take a look at diagnosing that first before we bother even getting a smoke machine out. So I'm going to go ahead and unplug it, hence why I have a code. I just want to be able to get access to this thing. Now one side here is going to the back to the tank. The other side here is going to intake manifold vacuum. So let's see. Let's go like this. We'll leave it connected to intake vacuum, and let's throw a vacuum gauge on that port that's going back to the tank. This will tell us if it's leaking vacuum on the EVAP system at all times. So we'll go ahead and put our gauge on there, Get that set there. Let's take a look. Let that run for a second. You guys are talkative today. And yeah, you can put tape on the vice grips or folded rag. Something to keep the teeth from cutting into the hose would be ideal. Nick, I believe, yes, I believe this would be pre-Fiat. This is an 07. All right, so it might be a little hard for you guys to see, but we're pulling 5 inches of vacuum into our EVAP side, okay, into our canister side through our purge solenoid. Is that good or is that bad? Is that an issue for us? Now remember, this system's going to run through a small leak test when the key is off, engine is off, system is cooling, okay? So if our purge solenoid, if our engine vacuum has overcome the internals of the purge solenoid and started to put a slight vacuum onto the EVAP system, is it going to cause us our code? Most likely not, as long as this remains dead steady. If this is perfectly steady, we're maintaining that level of vacuum. So let's see. We're still there. We'll leave it sit there for a minute. And then we can also verify this another way. If we smoke test from the back up to the purge with the purge connected, we're able to see if it's leaking or not. Good old alarm going off. I guess I ran the vehicle for too long in the shop. So let's take a look at our gauge. Still looks really, really good there at 5 inches of vacuum. Again, is that a problem? Is it not? Is that normal? Is it not? I prefer to verify using our smoke, right? If we leave this guy disconnected and just have it connected to the canister side, if we smoke from the back side to the front, we're able to see if we have smoke coming through our purge port. Again, we're using way less pressure when we're smoke testing than what our engine vacuum is. So it's possible we're overcoming some sort of internal threshold inside of this purge when we have engine vacuum applied, but smoke or vacuum testing with our vehicle may not overcome that. And there goes the exhaust fan. Nice. So let's start by smoke testing this vehicle in the easiest manner, because again, we like to work easy. So I have the smoke test over on the side so you guys can see it on the other camera. I'm going to take and hook it up to our purge port on here. And I'm just using a small cone adapter going into the port that goes into the purge solenoid, and then it actually goes back to the rest of the EVAP system. So if you look at the diagram, I'm actually hooked up right here on the system, okay? We're hooked up right here. Purge solenoid currently is out of the loop, and we're connected right here. So now what we're testing is we're forcing smoke down into the tank. We're going to fill up the gas tank. We're going to fill up the filler neck all the way to the canister, all the way to the ESIM. Now if we run the smoke test without plugging this, we're never going to see our needle or our ball drop in the smoke machine. So we're going to go ahead and plug that up back by the canister, and then we'll run this smoke test. So I am putting a rag over the jaws of the pliers just so I don't cut into the air hose. And these things are located under the back fender, and I'll show you once we get the vehicle up in the air. But for now, I just want to get this hose pinched off as best I can. All right, that feels pretty good. And we'll turn our smoke machine on. So right away you'll see our pressure comes up on the smoke machine. And we're going to be watching this little ball at the top here. So that's going to tell us where our leak is at. And then I'm just going to verify under the hood that we're not leaking out of our connection point here, making sure that, you know, we don't have any smoke coming out of there at all. Go ahead, flip the light on its stronger power to really get some light in there to look for any smoke wisping out of our connection point. Because this isn't a normal connection type of thing for the vehicle. So if we wanted to, we could zip tie around here or tape around here to make sure we have a perfectly good connection, but it looks pretty good right now. I don't see any smoke coming out of there at all. Get this guy out of the way. And now we kind of just have to wait until we fill up the charcoal in the canister, fill up the fuel tank itself, because let's check and see how low we are with the tank. So we are at just over half a tank of gas. So it's going to take a little while for that to overcome all that volume, to fill all that volume up with smoke. And our needle is starting to bounce. I can hear what sounds like creaking back here or bubbling, and I wonder if that's because we're losing our pressure past the substandard hose clamped filler hose or filter hose here. So again, we have a clamp right here, and I can hear what sounds like bubbling or like air escaping. So it's possible I don't have a very good connection on here, and it's also possible I might not ever be able to fully collapse that hose to seal 100%. So what else can we do in order to make sure that our leak is nowhere in the rest of the system? What I prefer is going to the canister itself and smoke testing from here all the way through the rest of the system. This will also allow us to test our purge solenoid. So instead of going in right here, because we have no way to electronically close essentially the vent solenoid on this vehicle, we have no way to close that right here. We're going to have to go back and disconnect this and smoke test through there, because right now the needle is bouncing. I don't know if we actually have a leak or if we just have a bad connection that could lead us astray. So we'll go ahead and shut it off. I'll disconnect this guy, and what I'm going to do is put the purge solenoid back in place, but I'm going to leave the intake manifold side disconnected. So I'm going to use the canister side connected because that's what's going to be checking for our leak, and we'll leave the intake manifold side disconnected so we can watch to see if we have a leak through here. All right. Now we'll get this off of here, get this out of the way, and now we're going to have to lift up the vehicle to be able to actually get to the canister itself. Again, these are in the left rear wheel well on this vehicle. All right, so it'll just be a second here as we wait for this to get up to the proper level. All right, vehicle's up where it needs to be. There's our canister. There's my vice grip on there with a rag on it. Let's just make sure I'm not missing anything in the comments. All right. And yes, Nick, it's an internal compressor smoke machine, so it does not need to be hooked up to external or shop air. It's a great little tool, especially if you're on the run. If you're doing this thing as mobile, or something like that, not having to have a specific air supply for it is really, really nice to have. All it needs is to hook up to a battery of some sort. So I actually have it hooked up to a 12-volt power supply right now that I've used in some other videos, but I've also hooked it up to a jump box, to the car's battery, to a secondary battery, whatever I can find that's got 12 volts in it. I've run the smoke machine off of. So it's really a cool tool for being able to do that kind of stuff. All right, so what we have here at the canister, we have, again, like our diagram showed, we have two connection points, right? We have our connection going to the rest of the system. So this connection right here is going to our fuel tank. Above that, which is hard to see right now, I do have this unbolted so we can pull it down in a little bit, but above that is our ESIM up there at the top, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to disconnect this guy, hopefully, and I'm going to show you what I like to do for these. Because I don't have a tool that fits directly into this connection point right here, I don't know if they make one, but I made one. So I had a canister laying around. I cut the end of it off of the old canister that was junk from when I had laying around from a different job. Cut that end off, and I securely taped it into one of the fittings for my smoke machine. So now I can get a pretty good connection point going right into the EVAP system on this Jeep. So there we go. Clicks right in there, seals up as good as can be expected. We'll pull off the other fitting on there and we'll fire this thing up again and see what happens. Try not to trip over any cords. So we have smoke coming out. I guess it's always good to verify that your smoke machine's actually doing its job. And we'll let this thing fill up with smoke. So now what we're looking at on this vehicle is we're connected right here. We're connected right here, and we're smoking this way. We're smoking this entire part of the system. So the canister and the ESIM are not currently being leak tested. We're leak testing everything else throughout this entire system, including the purge solenoid, okay? So we don't have to electronically seal anything. We don't have to hose clamp anything at this point because our purge is a normally closed item. Our gas cap is normally closed. Those are the only two parts of the system that have the ability to be open or closed. They're both normally closed. So we should be all set to just watch this smoke machine and see what we see. And now we're starting to get that leak down to where it needs to be. And actually, if we can bring that thing up full screen so you guys can see, our needle is below the small leak threshold. So we're under 20 thousandth. I'm going to bring the card down so we can take a look at that purge. So we're under 20 thousandth. Are you guys good to say we need an ESIM and throw it in and run it out? I don't know that I would be at this point. I mean, this is really where a conversation has to come in with your customer, right? It's how much time do you have involved in it? How much have you verified? How much evidence do you have for the customer to condemn the entire EVAP system or sell more time to diagnose the rest of the EVAP system? Right now, we're under, according to our smoke machine, which hasn't been calibrated in a few years, we're under the threshold of setting a small leak. So technically speaking, with our ESIM and canister currently isolated, technically speaking, we have a leak that's not going to set a check engine light. Okay? But a leak's a leak, right? I mean, if it's leaking, it's leaking, and it's only going to continue to get worse. So again, that's where your conversation with your customer really needs to come in. Now looking at this guy, I see tiny little wisps of smoke every so often coming out here, just tiny little ones. if I plug this up, let's see what happens. So I'm holding the port closed with my finger, and really no change in our smoke machine. So is our purge solenoid a problem? Does not appear to be. Now I'm going to let my finger off of here, and I want to see if that little needle there jumps up, because then all of a sudden we have space to fill with our smoke. No change. But I am seeing just tiny little, every so often, just the smallest little faint hint of smoke coming out of there. So this is where it gets to be a question for your customer of what do you sell on this vehicle? We haven't confirmed any other leak source. Technically, we haven't confirmed any leak source. We've been able to confirm what's leaking and what's not, or what appears to not be. We're under the small leak code for the entire system up to the canister and the ESIM assembly, which means we could have a canister issue, an ESIM issue, or the O-ring in between the two that fits right in between ESIM and canister. We could have an issue with one of those, but we also have a 10 to 15 thousandth, what's appearing to be a 10 to 15 thousandth leak on the rest of the system, okay? Now I don't want you guys to get burned by reoccurring check engine lights. This system should be further inspected. Now the customer on this one has chose to go ahead and put a canister ESIM assembly on here because of where the TSB falls, because of that was what they wanted to do. They didn't want to drop the tank down for further inspection on top. They haven't gone and wanted to do any of that stuff. But if you're looking for a tank issue, it was actually really nice. Peekaboo sent me this morning, and I hope you're okay with me using it in here, but he was doing a leak test on a 2011 Liberty, and this is the top, I believe this is the fuel pump assembly itself in the top of the tank. Sprayed it down with some soapy water, and you can see the bubbles right there. So I really appreciate you sharing this. It goes really well with this story because this could have something very similar if the customer wanted us to go further with it. I did take and spray down the top of the tank from as far as I could see from without removing the tank or dropping the tank at all. Sprayed it down with soapy water, and there was no sign of a leak at all. So the customer has chose to go and replace the ESIM and the canister on here as the assembly and see what happens. And if, unfortunately, I have no way to force this thing back through another small leak test without it actually running on its own. So what we're going to do, we're going to pull the old one off and inspect it because I'd really like to see what it looks like inside. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to cut it apart right away, but we can go ahead, shake it, see if there's dirt coming out of there, see if it's kind of grungy inside of this thing, because I think that'll be a lot of evidence for us as well. So we'll get it back up in the air. And I'm really curious to see if we have any of the charcoal pieces floating around inside of this, or coming out of this canister, stuck inside of the ESIM assembly. So I just want to check the chat quick, see what you guys are saying. Chat disconnected. Uh-oh. And suddenly I have no internet. Oh no. All right. Cool. All right, well that's okay. Let's see if we can pull it up this way. I was curious to see what you guys were thinking on what you would do in this situation, how you would approach the customer that kind of thing. So get to the chat through the phone here and see what you guys say. Black tape over the light bulb, done. Any leak is a leak, yeah, you're right. All right, let's pull this canister out of here and take a peek, see what we're working with. So like I said, I've already unbolted it, just so it's easier to get out, so I'm not having to waste your time today watching me take out 2 rusty, crusty bolts. So we got our fresh air hose at the top, there we go, and then just our connector for the ESIM, and you guys can see all this. I mean, look at that. How is this expected to last in this environment? And this thing's not even used as an off-road vehicle. Oh, I mean, just all the sand that came out of that connector alone. Good old Wisconsin winters. All right, so we'll bring this thing back over. So it's all caked full. And somewhere here, there's like something broken on here. Grab a screwdriver. So, oh, it's a rock. There's a rock jammed in there. All right. There's a release tab on here. And then we should be able to spin this. There we go. So again, you can change out just the ESIM itself on here. There it comes. So you guys probably can't really see too well inside of here, but there's our weights inside. The big one's moving. The other one doesn't seem to be wanting to do much, and there's some crud inside of this guy. I'm not seeing any charcoal or anything like that. Nothing coming out of here. These things have like a fibrous type of mesh inside of there to kind of hold the charcoal in. Nothing coming out. You know, shake it, nothing's loose. So really, this canister could go back on. It did pull the 2 studs out of it. So there's 2 studs that sit on either side here. The nuts rusted in place and both studs came out with it. So you'd have to put the studs back in, because putting metal studs into plastic, like, this is what it's supposed to look like. 2 studs there. The nuts rusted tight, pulled the plastic, or the studs right out of the plastic, unfortunately. You'd have to find a way to reattach the 2 studs. But definitely a bunch of crud in here, but it doesn't look horrible on here. But this is what the customer had wanted to do on here, so that's what we're gonna do. Have you seen, Mike, Flat Rate Master, have you seen anything with a 10,000th leak yet? I know most of the new machines are calibrated or set up for that 10,000 leak, but I actually haven't seen a car that's running the 10,000 leak yet. I don't think I'm going to be able to open this guy up right now. The glue is pretty strong in these. This one actually had to be cut open on the bandsaw. It's not going to break either. As far as finding that smaller leak, if you spend the time on it, your next steps would be smoke test the rest of the system, get it under pressure. Soapy water works really well. Smoke that has dye in it, and then you use your yellow goggles or yellow glasses to help find that dye. That works really well. What we're probably looking for here is something that's on top of the tank. And I'll take you guys under the car here. Maybe. Let's go for a ride. Hopefully not make anybody sick. But right up there, you can see the filler neck right there. If you continue further up, that's where the fuel pump module is. All right, wish I had a flashlight under here. But that's where our fuel pump module assembly is, okay? That's where it might be leaking. Now again, I did spray that down with a bottle of soapy water and looked up there with a flashlight and a mirror looking for any sort of leaks. There was nothing found on that, and that's where I left it off with the customer. You know, checked over the tank, checked over the lines, checked over purge, checked over everything, see nothing leaking. Do you want me to continue further through the diagnosis? Should I pull the tank down part way, put a jack under there, pull the tank down part way, do a more thorough inspection on the top of the tank? I can only diagnose what I'm able to get to, and the customer chose to not go further with it. They chose to go the route of the common failure, the Google failure, the whatever you want to call it. Identifix is lit up with issues with the ESIM assembly. You know, that's what this customer's chosen to go with on here, and that's unfortunately what we have to do. Would I like to pull the tank down and do that? Ideally, yes, because that 15,000th leak, there's something that's just seeping on here, but we don't know for sure if that's going to set a check engine light or not. Technically, it shouldn't, because the test is testing for a 20,000th leak, small leak. Andreas, I did check out the gas cap. Another really good little check that you can do, if you have one of these, and I guess I should show that. Why don't I show that? If you have a gas cap tester piece like this, I'm still going to pressure test this assembly in the same place, but I'm going to swap the gas cap out for this guy and see if I have any change in my pressure reading. So why don't we just go ahead and do that really quickly, because it's quick and easy, and I'll show you guys how I check out the gas cap slash filler neck assembly. So I'm putting the hose back in the same spot underneath there, getting the system pressurizing as I bring the vehicle back down to the ground. There we go. So we're starting to fill the system. Try to get you guys in place here. There we go. All right, so our needle has dropped down again, right? We're sitting at 20,000th on there. So what I'm going to do, pull the gas cap, make sure that we actually have smoke coming out, because that would be really unfortunate if we had a check valve or check ball in the filler neck that wasn't actually testing our gas cap at that point. But obviously we have smoke coming out. Our needle went back up to the top. If you have one of these guys, Works really nice to, well, first of all, inspect your sealing surface here, then put this guy on, get it tight, and then I just plug up the hose and I watch my smoke machine. And we're looking for the ball would, if our gas cap was an issue, the little ball or needle in there would actually end up going lower than what it did before, meaning our leak would be lesser or smaller than it was before. And right now we're just filling the system back up with pressure with smoke. Come on. Really hope the smoke machine doesn't time out right now, because then I'll have to let go of this rubber hose that's on here. There we go, it's starting to drop. And again, we're just overcoming all that volume of air that's in the tank. And actually our leak looks slightly worse now since I swapped over to this cap. Now I don't see any smoke coming out of here. Of course, from where I'm standing, I can't reach my flashlight. But again, really, we're not looking at any difference, and in fact, it actually does look worse using this gas cap. Take that off, swap back to our original. And it should go back to where it was before. Yeah, you want to be really careful with using any sort of compressed air because you can blow things out. I mean, we're talking a tiny, tiny, tiny amount of pressure. 10 inches of water is a tiny amount of pressure. I've actually seen like GM fuel tank pressure sensors with the pressure sensor itself that's mounted inside of the plastic with a hole blown right through it because somebody had used compressed air looking for a leak on the tank. Okay, same thing with using any other smoke machine that's not meant for EVAP. You can overpressurize components in the system and ruin them by doing it. So like you said, you used a really small amount of air. Just be really, really careful when you're doing that kind of thing. Lyle, I agree. The small whiff of smoke out of the purge solenoid not changing the gauge, that was kind of odd. You know, maybe this thing should also get a purge solenoid. I didn't see the gauge there when it shut off. I wonder if we were back to where we were before. Yep, looks pretty good. Now the one system that I would like to try at some point is the bullseye leak detection system. I don't know if you guys have ever used it before, if you've had luck with it, but it uses CO2 instead of smoke, and then it's got a sniffer with it and stuff. So at some point I'd like to give that thing a shot and see if that's able to find these really, really tiny small leaks that aren't really showing up using smoke in a traditional flashlight or smoke with dye in it, you know, that kind of thing. Anything that helps make our jobs for finding this stuff a little bit easier. I'm not sure on pricing Sancte Alphonse. I'm pretty sure these things are relatively cheap. When I get parts for cars through work here, we get them. We actually do have this in our catalog, so I get them right out of our warehouse. That's also part of why this customer chose to do the canister. And the ESIM assembly, just because we get our little employee discount type of stuff. Yep, just be really careful whenever you're using actual air pressure. Any other questions? You guys kind of understand now how to look for how to diagnose the ESIM system. When we're looking for really small leaks in these systems, sometimes we have to either sell more time for diagnostics, or we have to kind of, unfortunately, process of elimination it. And unfortunately, that's kind of the way this one has turned out, that we have a crusty old ESIM that is most likely going to be our cause. But I would prefer that we end up looking a little bit further on here, pull the tank down part way, and sell probably another hour of diagnosis on this vehicle to get to where that other 15,000th of a leak is. Because technically speaking, our vehicle with a new canister and new ESIM mounted on it should pass a leak test, right? We're down between 10 and 15,000th. We should pass a leak test on this vehicle. The customer should be happy, no check engine light on here, and that's why they chose the decision that they did. Yeah, Richard, I don't know about using our 134A. Probably not something that you want to go suggesting just because you have no way to recover that refrigerant afterwards. Be careful with that type of thing. You don't want that venting out into the atmosphere and getting yourself in trouble. Yep. Just flash the ECU, reinitialize to ignore leaks, problem solved. If only working on cars was that simple sometimes, right? ECU flashes fix a lot, but I don't think it's going to ignore the leaks on here. So, any other questions? Otherwise, we'll get to the t-shirt question and we'll call it a day just before an hour here. Yes, Nick, that is a really good point, and I have mentioned it in all the other EVAP training that I've done. Remember to remind your customers, yourself, your family members, the person at the pump that's clicking the nozzle 17 times, don't overfill your gas tank, okay? They can end up forcing raw fuel, liquid fuel, down into your canister assembly. When this thing ends up with raw fuel in it, it breaks down and will or can shoot that charcoal through the entire system, okay? Do not overfill your tank. All right. You know, auto tech video, it's kind of the way this goes. It's kind of a hard thing to sell. Is we've isolated the entire system. The entire system appears to be the entire system minus the ESIM and the canister appears to be passing the leak test. That only leaves the ESIM and the canister to be what's causing the leak test to fail. That's kind of the way that this was approached with the customer. And then, I mean, I don't know if you guys use the silver bullets, you know, Identifix, that kind of thing. If you look at this, the evidence is out there that they have a huge problem. I mean, a lot of us have already probably thrown on tons of these things anyway. But the ESIMs are incredibly common for failure in here. I'm not saying that that's a diagnosis. It's just another piece of evidence for you with the customer, okay? The worst part about this for me, the worst part is that after I put a canister and the ESIM on this vehicle, after I get that done, after I get this car all buttoned up, I either need to drive this thing and park it, and drive it and park it, or I need to give it back to the customer to see if it passes that small leak test. I have no way to force it with the scan tool to make sure that we're not leaking with this system, and that's a little bit frustrating. And I can't even use the smoke machine to tell if something is different, because all we end up doing is overcoming the relief valve on the ESIM, basically making it void in our test. We're not actually testing the ESIM when we smoke test the system, and that's a little bit frustrating in what we have to deal with when we're looking at these ESIM systems. All right. So let's take a look at our t-shirt giveaway question. Capless systems, great question. The capless systems are still going to use seals built in to the filler neck. Most of them run a double seal system, so you'll want to just check for smoke coming out of that thing. Take your flashlight, look in there. If you have the little funnel, you can go bypass the first seal, which is like the dirt seal type of thing. Take your funnel in there and see if you see any leaks coming out of that second sealing portion there. Yes, Chris, you're right. It is really the design that makes them failure prone. It's unfortunate for us as technicians because it makes it a very hard sell. What is fortunate is I believe these things are pretty inexpensive to replace on these vehicles. I'm not sure what our price is on it. I don't even want to get into that, but it's relatively inexpensive, I believe, for just the ESIM assembly. So, t-shirt question. First 5 people to answer the question right today are going to win one of these awesome Diagnose Before You Triagnose t-shirts. Thank you again to all the previous winners who have won and are hopefully wearing this shirt proudly throughout their town. We have sent out quite a few already. If you've already won a t-shirt, please still send in your answer. We'll chat back and forth via email, that kind of thing. But I want people who haven't won a shirt yet to be able to have the opportunity. So first 5 people, you have until midnight tonight for your email to reach me. Here's the questions. 2 techs are discussing a 456 EVAP trouble code, small leak code on an ESIM system. Tech A says that a stuck closed purge solenoid cannot cause this fault. Tech B says the ESIM switch has failed. And that's the switch itself, internal of the ESIM. He is saying that that has failed. Who is correct? Tech A, B, both, or neither? All right. Just note, Tech B is saying the switch, not the assembly. Okay. Little hint there for you guys. All right. Hey Bob, I'm glad you made it. I don't know if you were in the chat earlier, but glad you made it. I hope you're feeling well today. I'm glad you're wearing your shirt proudly all the time. That's awesome. Thank you. So, any other questions on this ESIM system? Really, not a horrible system to diagnose, not terribly difficult. The worst part is getting to a solid 100%, even 99% answer. I want to be able to check something 2 different ways so that I can make sure that it's actually failed. And this ESIM engineering, the way it's designed, the way it's built, really doesn't allow us to do that aspect because there's no way to functionally, forcibly close this system. The pressure relief always kicks in before it's closed, unless you have a way to test under half an inch of water and accurately check that system for leaks. I don't think it's going to happen. So, it makes you a better tech. That's awesome. The power of the t-shirt. That's really great, guys. I wish I didn't have to look at my phone for the comments today, but my internet just appears to be giving me all kinds of trouble. So I'm gonna slap on the canister and the ESIM and clear out these codes and get this thing back to the customer. If we don't have any other questions, I'm gonna go ahead and let you guys go. I hope this all makes sense. EVAP testing in general, you most likely are always going to need either the smoke machine or like the CO2 type of unit, like that bullseye leak detection that Bernie's company makes. You need something to be able to pressurize the system and check it for leaks. The nicest thing is that even though we're using smoke, we really today relied on our leak gauge to help us determine what was going on. So I guess just quickly going to do a plug for the NGK Tech portal. This is our little website where you can go on and get some different training, some stuff that we don't put out on YouTube that we only put here. We also do testing with it as well, so you have to watch the class and take a test, and hopefully pass that test. In the future, we'll come out with some certificates and stuff on here as this continues to grow. It's going to be an ever-growing thing. Go ahead and create yourself an account. With that creation in the account, I will be able to use your email then to send you a notification of our next upcoming classes, which I believe our next one will be November 7th. I believe it'll be November 7th for our next class. That date might be subject to change just because I believe that is when SEMA is going on. We might do it the following week. We'll just see how that goes. But watch for an email from me announcing when the class is, and then watch for it to be created out on YouTube. Brand of the smoke machine, it is a, good question, Smoke Pro Air Complete Diagnostic Leak Detector. I'll zoom you guys out a little bit. There you go. So that's what it is, and I think, I don't know, I thought this thing was made by Redline. Yep, manufactured by Redline. So I'm sure if you go out to Redline's website, you can find this smoke machine that's got the built-in compressor in it. Alrighty. Triagnose. Triagnose is kind of what we... No, we didn't triagnose today. We diagnosed this car as far as we could, as far as the customer was allowing us to on here. Yes, please, if you haven't already, give us that thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber to the channel, please subscribe. That way you get notifications when we publish something new, a new video, or we got a new live class coming out. Again, check out our NGK Tech portal for some more training, a little bit different stuff than what we do out on YouTube, and also shorter classes for you to watch. And then you also will get email alerts from me of upcoming classes. It's kind of our little subscriber list that we're getting together on there. So I really appreciate everybody being here today, joining in for some ESIM training on our 07 Jeep Commander. And really, guys, Chrysler systems ESIM will operate just about the same on most of the newer Chrysler vehicles. So the principles that you learned today, you can apply to other ESIM Chrysler vehicles. So without any further questions, let's wrap it up. Thank you again for watching. Give us that thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Happy wrenching, everyone. Thank you.